Hello, everyone. This is Justin Smythe from nextbigtrade.com. This is the sector review for July 25th, 2025. Starting off with cryptocurrency, this sector continues to fascinate me. We've had a 2-year big bull market in this sector. When it broke out into stage two back in 2023, nobody really cared about Bitcoin. Nobody really believed it. And that's exactly what happens when things break out into stage two. Usually there's disbelief. And people are still reacting from the previous bear market where they're, got beat up and they don't really think something has huge potential. And then something rallies for 2 years, huge gains are made, and then all of a sudden people expect the gains to keep piling up late in a rally because that's what they're used to now. And then the exact opposite happens. The gains are much harder to come by because we're late in a rally, and then eventually things roll over, and then these late bulls are in big trouble because we start to move into a downtrend. So think about how much euphoria has been in Bitcoin since the end of 2024 and recently, and this is what price has done. It's gone sideways for 8-9 months, and then we had this little breakout here, and all these Bitcoin bulls are acting like this is the best thing ever, and Bitcoin barely has gained at all on this breakout, and then you're already getting selling pressure coming in here immediately after the breakout. But again, they're expecting to see huge gains after this, and the funny thing is the gains have already been made. They were made way back in 2023 when the stage two breakout happened, and now we're 2 years into a major bull market, and now they're finally bullish, which is quite ironic. But again, this to me looks like it's going to be a failed breakout. It is late stage. We've already seen this stage three topping pattern forming for quite a while now, and we're kind of just waiting for this to finally roll over, as there is likely not going to be enough bulls to really continue to buy this market, and the selling pressure. There's already been tons of selling pressure keeping a lid on price here, but now we're just looking to see what's going to happen on this breakout, and again, it's already meeting selling pressure. Turning over to some of these other major ETFs, this appears to be where the volume's coming in now, because the volume on the individual cryptocurrencies is basically non-existent, which is another negative sign for this breakout. Ethereum has had a nice 2-week move, showing a little bit of selling pressure coming in here. This isn't super worrisome. Ethereum might have a little bit of more room to run higher here, but starting to see the sellers kind of coming in here this past week. But a couple of these other ones, Solana, this is an ETF that just came out for Solana. Big volume early in the rally, but you're seeing the sellers kind of establish themselves here this week, pushing price back lower. You've got, a pretty big move from the top down to where this closed. This looks a little bit worse here. And then the worst is XRP, where monster volume comes back in on this ETF to the downside this week. This looks like XRP has higher odds now that it's put in a top. Although XRP does have minimal resistance, but again, the sellers came in here and really pushed this ETF at least down this week. So again, you're seeing the selling pressure coming into the cryptocurrencies now. And then if you look at the stocks, they just look terrible. It's almost, I had to go through this list of stocks twice just to the bullishness on Bitcoin, yet how bad something like this looks. If you look at CGC in 2018, in October, you got the same candlestick here where that was a cannabis stock that topped during the cannabis bull market. Nobody really believed that cannabis had topped yet. and it was just a big reversal and heavy volume that put in the top for that leading stock. And then this IREN is a widely followed cryptocurrency miner, one of the last ones that was looking pretty good here, I didn't think it was looking that great because I saw some selling pressure coming in here, but you've got a failed breakout here on huge volume, and this is exactly how markets tend to top. And all these cryptocurrency stocks look like this now. There's Hood still looks okay, but I mean for the most part, this is what everything looks like now, which is not good. This looks like a failed breakout on heavy volume, and it's likely going to head lower from here. And again, the market always tops before the majority think it's a top. That's how the market works. And people have recency bias. They expect things to go higher perpetually, but technical analysis shows you when the sellers are coming in. And when you see a lot of this across a sector, it means the sector's in trouble. And that's what's going on with cryptocurrency. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if Bitcoin can continue to push higher, but there's a lot of technical evidence against that. And we've already started looking at, obviously, shorting MSTR, which is starting to work this week. We'll talk about that on the focus watch list. Semiconductors showing cracks for 2 weeks now. ASML, negative earnings last week. TXN just got brutalized this week after earnings. There was other semiconductor stocks that sold off this week on heavy volume. There's huge divergences in this sector now. NVIDIA and AVGO are basically the only two stocks that are really pushing this sector at this point. So this is looking very, biggest week of selling pressure so far since April now, this week. And this has a failed breakout type of look to it too, as this progresses potentially. So again, semiconductors are looking like this short is starting to work now, and I think it's going to continue to work here very soon. And it should be a good trade to the downside as semiconductors are going to have a major correction after this move. Financials are acting better this week, and they were showing some cracks last week. And again, like this is really a line in the sand. If it's hard to present a bearish case until the financials break down, and they did continue to act well this week, at least the major banks. They still are showing an underperformance against the S&P 500. They did outperform this week, but again, if this continues to move higher, that reduces the case for the a bear case really for this market. But I think this is still on failed breakout watch. And then one of the negative signs for the financials though was the regionals, which did close lower this week, unable to follow the major banks higher. This is not good. And again, you're still off the highs for the regional banks. Regional banks tend to get in trouble early when things are starting to weaken, and we'll see how this continues to act. But a divergence here this week with the regional banks acting weaker. Gold was not up this week with the US dollar down on the week. That's not good. And you got this distribution pattern, failure to make a new high. I think the top for gold is probably in here. And gold tends to move lower or make a major top when it's in bull mode before most other asset classes, and then it tends to bottom before other asset classes as well. And basically during this rally, you saw a quick bottom for gold in April, and then gold was done just 3 weeks later. So gold basically topped, so long ago in this rally, and it's just been held up by everything else rallying. And, once this thing rolls over, we're looking at a major correction in gold. So gold looking toppy here, silver doing the same thing, unable to rally with a down US dollar. That's not good. The one sector that's looking like it's intact here, even though there's been a lot of volatility, is the utilities with GEV reporting good earnings. A lot of the utilities really ramped up last week, and those are the ones that where back here looked like they needed a rest, and it just kind of turned into another breakout again, and then they are basically the one sector that's been the leader off of the April lows that's still powering higher. So this one might still have potential to kind of blow off to the upside before this rally is over. Uranium, interestingly, is following the nuclear trend, but the price of uranium, I think, is not really following through. So, this is basically this same bull market that's, continuing here, but getting into its later stages. Finally, looking at the US dollar again, interestingly, the EFA World Stock ETF made a new high this week, but the euro did not. That's the first time there's been a divergence there. And I think that's, again, a warning sign for this market, because this market's been US dollar negative, foreign stock positive, and euro positive. And now you've got a divergence between the euro and the EFA. US dollar got some negative news last week, but it failed to make a lower low. I think the US dollar is still poised to continue higher here, and that'll be another sign that a correction is getting very near. Finally, these leading sectors, space was a monster this cycle. We identified this early, and there was, Rocket Lab was a monster winner here, among other stocks. But now you've got heavy volume selling. Again, it's a sign that, this sector is now looking like it's getting toppy. There's multiple stocks taking heavy downside selling pressure, just like cryptocurrency stocks. And when you see these leading sectors start to top out, that's a warning sign for an upcoming correction. So bottom line, the utilities are the one sector that's still trending higher here. Cryptocurrency stocks look terrible. That sector looks like it's in trouble. And we'll see if Bitcoin can continue to push. And then the US dollar didn't make a lower low. That's a negative for this market. And again, watch those financials, because, XLF closing below 51 would be a bearish event for this stock market.